Welcome back, everyone. After those excellent interventions by our Honorable Minister and Secretary and an insightful panel discussion, we would now like to play a short trailer for you all of a film produced by CEW titled Cooling in You. May I please request Shikha to kindly come in and share some context about the same? Thank you.
Thank you, Jalak, and welcome back, everybody. Earlier this morning, I wasn't really being superlative about the fact that this room is filled with cooling champions. Unfortunately, we're a limited bunch when it comes to our country. And in our attempt to try and reiterate the point that cooling is, in fact, intrinsic to our economy, to our health, to our well-being, and to our jobs growth.
The heat wave in India continues with no sign of relief in the form of rainfall, and the months ahead look unbearable.
The mercury continues to climb in Delhi,
with forecasters predicting record-breaking temperatures for the capital, Delhi.
पहले से बहुत ज़्यादा गर्मी है, साल बेलिमिट गर्मी है.
Imagining a life without cooling is very difficult because it's now a part and parcel of everyday life.
You cannot think hospitals without cooling.
मेडिसिन जो भी है विदाउट रेफ्रिजरेशन हमारा काम ही नहीं हो पाएगा.
दिल्ली जैसे शहर में मुझे लगता है कि गाड़ियों में एसी की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि क्लाइंट हमेशा ये सोचेंगे कि हम जिस भी गाड़ी में जा रहे हैं उसमें एसी एकदम ओके हो, तो पहला उनका क्वेश्चन नहीं होता गाड़ी में एसी तो चल रहा है ना, ठीक से चल रहा है ना.
Cooling is for all. So everyone needs cooling. Whether we are at home, whether we are in our car, whether we are watching movie, wherever we are going, when even our chocolates, ice cream, coffee, whatever.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to please invite the speakers for our next session. If I could request Mr. Java, Mr. Panikar, Mr. Vishal Kapoor, and Ms. Ritu Ghosh to please join me up on stage. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for being here. I'm actually really honored to be a part of this panel discussion and ask some of the harder hitting questions that I think really need to be looked at, especially when we're thinking about amping up manufacturing in India with an attempt to increasing the innovation potential of our nation. And so to look at some of these aspects that are both critical and crucial, but not as easily solvable, I'm really pleased to be welcoming you all up on stage here with me. I would like to start first with Mr. Java. When we think about the production-linked incentives, right, it's a scheme that's been met with much gusto. From industry, it's a scheme that is taking our Atmanirbharta as a sankalp, as Honorable Minister mentioned earlier today. What is the industry's response been to it beyond the encouragement, of course, that you see it giving to you?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, Shikha, for inviting me to this August gathering. As regards to PL, I will go slightly into the background of this. You know, we are a nation which is almost 1.2 billion people. I think that's the only area where we are competing with China. And I have been in the air conditioning for almost last 40 years. And I have been seeing this, that, the industry moving at a very snail's pace. So when you actually compare with China, just to give you a broader perspective, China is more than 100 million. And India was in 2019 only 4 millions. The sales may have been about 7 million, but 4 million was India, and rest of the machines were coming from, air conditioners were coming from China. So I think thanks to COVID, people realize that, that what is that, how much damage, we all know that, China has done. There was a lot of time antipathy because when the COVID first wave came, you may call it as a economic crisis, but I would say it was more of a human crisis, We didn't know where to go. We didn't have kits, we didn't have medicines, and whole world actually started looking at what do we do. And I think that is the time which unfortunately Mr. Agarwal is not there, otherwise I wanted to acknowledge his presence, that the DPIT started jumping. Mr. Mehta knows it, and Mr. Mehta was the Secretary Rama at that time, and we were invited by Mr. Mohapatra, who was the DPIT director. He says that now this is the situation, and why is, because we were all asked from the manufacturing standpoint of view that why is India not producing? And I think we had a session almost at the same time. True. So we said, ask Nirata, ask ICRA, ask Panasonic, ask the Indian manufacturers, some of them are sitting here. So that time Rama President was invited with the Rama Secretary, and we started talking about that why is not manufacturing not in India. And there were a number of, I won't go into those details now, but the fact was that the DPIT, Invest India and Niti Aayog quickly went to the associations like FICCI. Again, Ritu was instrumental there. Went to CII, went to Nirata, went to ICRA, and we all came together at one platform, and we said, if this industry has to have a second engine, then I think India is the alternate to China. And Japanese also, because since I also represent a Japanese company, they said 15,000 Japanese companies in China and only maybe less than 1,500 in India. They also woke up. And I'm happy to share today, not only the PLI, there were various initiatives which were taken by the government of India, started looking at differently, because big reason that, any whether it is a mobile phone or whether it is a car or whether it is the air conditioner or any other white goods component, I think disability factor versus China was almost 12 to 15%. Then scale committee came, then all the minds of the country came together. Government was very receptive, industry responded to the needs, and today we can see 43 companies in white goods and ACs have applied for PLI. And when government saw such a positive response coming from them, because of course, the industry responded that what is required, what we are talking about, whether CEW or AEE or everybody is talking about, today we have industry stalwarts sitting here, that sustainability. It is not that, companies are also running today just to pay dollar taxes. They are looking at innovation, they are looking at research and development, and more big companies are being joined by the youngster today, the companies who are responsible for sustainability drives or energy efficiency. So this country, I always felt that had great potential, scales, and that is how PLI came. So PLI was largely with consent of the industry and was a moment which was primarily adjusting what is the disability factor.
Thank you. Ritu, I saw you nodding extensively to Mr. Java's comments. I want to ask you and pick up on that point of sustainability, right? Because explicitly, the PLI scheme does not include any kind of sustainability ambition, as a protocol or as a mandate. But we see that the industry is not waiting for the government to mandate that, right? It's already sort of well ahead of the curve, even if we think about what we've committed to internationally. So I wanted to hear a little bit more from you in terms of where's the industry coming from, right? And what is that readiness that we're already finding in India that's allowing us to leapfrog?
Thank you for the question. And yes, I was nodding extensively because one beautiful thing about this PLI, as Javaji mentioned, was collaboration. The kind of collaboration the industry has seen amongst competitive brands, amongst government and industry, among small sector and big sector. It's been, I think, the first of its kind. And like all the associations also join hand in that thing. And to be able to understand competitiveness over here and sustainability angle, I would just like to step back to understand what was the objective of PLI when we all began. And when we talk about competitiveness, the two other important elements, which is capacity, that's building up the volume, and capability in terms of technology were the key things. And while competitiveness could be built when we have capability and capacity, it also further feeds in the capability, capacity feeds into competitiveness and vice versa. So PLI was the set the ball rolling towards that innovative cycle of this between capability, capacity and competitiveness. That was, so PLI's outcome of phase 1 and where we start with the phase 2. And in those terms, I believe today, when we talk about sustainability, I think sustainability is one of the major and the key elements which define competitiveness. While there was a lot of talk about how we build up the capacity, but when we talk about capability, it was given that capability would mean not only technological enhancement to offer quality, but also to answer the very pertinent questions on sustainability. Whether it be sustainability in terms of being net zero, or whether it being, we are also talking about now circular economy. So sustainability also means the design element in including that how we can have a sustainable design in those terms. And obviously, when we are fortunate enough that this is the time when the realization is there as an ecosystem, as an industry. And when we are leapfrogging to build that competitiveness, we are taking the global CEO as a global Panasonic. We have announced that we will be carbon neutral by 2030. Panasonic is an organization. So such commitments, such vision make us committed to that kind of vision. And as big brands, I think we hold the responsibility, and that has again been another objective of PLI, that it's about an ecosystem being built in. So when we build the ecosystem, we also handhold other organizations to contribute towards this sustainability bit. I think that's how we can move forward.
Right, thank you. This actually takes me to you, Mr. Kapoor, because the PLI scheme puts it out quite, overtly that the attempt is to increase manufacturing so that we can absorb the technology production that we're currently reliant on export markets for. While I understand the PLI is a step in that direction, what are some of the gaps and where do you think we really need to start focusing for that technology absorption and the manufacturing of that technology to take place in India?
So thank you and good afternoon to everyone in the audience today. It's a very interesting topic, and I represent ISHRE over here. ISHRE is actually more of a technical body and doesn't get much into manufacturing and production, but since we are connected to industry, it's good to be sitting on this platform with such dignitaries and sharing our views and thoughts. So just coming back before I answer your question to something what Ritu was talking about sustainability. If you divide it into three parts as we look at it as ISHRE, you have the manufacturing facilities, which need to be sustainable. And most of these organizations which are investing in manufacturing setups in India would today or tomorrow are already planning or will be planning into making their practices more sustainable. She talked about Panasonic. I'm sure most companies are doing in that direction. Second is the product that you're bringing out. Now, when you look at the star rating, we had Mr. Bakre talk about that a little earlier in the before panel. A product that comes out, whether it's being made in India, whether it's being imported, whether it's being assembled, or maybe a few years down the line where we'll reach that 80-90% manufacture and make in India, is going to be following those protocols of the government, which are leading us towards a sustainable product. So whether it's talking the star rating program, which are amongst the strictest in the world today as we look at it. So the product that comes out is going to be following those practices, and today staying limited to high wall split ACs right now. So I don't think that's going to be a challenge whether you make in India or not, because you will follow that technology. Third is the application side of the business, or how you're applying that technology. I'm sure the panel in the second half is going to be addressing that. So I just wanted to kind of throw a little light more further on the sustainability part of the thing. On the question you asked on the gaps between the scheme that has been launched and anything else needed, I'm sure Ajit and Mr. Java would be able to throw more light on that. But what we understand is as follows. PLI is linked more on incremental sales, right? You've got to deliver incremental sales of very high numbers, or very aggressive numbers in the years ahead. The gap in India is not so much so in finished goods. The gap in India is more on components. In components, being able to put up manufacturing setups of that level and being able to give, so you invest, you've got to deliver the incremental sales, and then you start getting incentives back from the government, is a tall task. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it is a tall task. If not, is one big block for people to start investing money, because you have to start that. You might get a PLI in year 3, year 4, year 6, but you've got to put in the money today. Now, very large organizations can do that, but the medium, the small, and you were talking about SMEs and MSMEs in your earlier talk, how will they get those funds ahead to put in the money today? So one is the cost of capital. How do you make things easy? Second is ease of doing business. I don't remember our rank today where we are, but it's way down in the list of countries of ease of doing business. Till these things are not sorted out, you will not be able to get the true benefit coming out of schemes like PLI, which is very well thought of, very well planned. But for it to become really big, because what is ICAP's main model, main theme is thermal comfort for all. Now, thermal comfort can come with building design, it can come through passive technologies, it can come through ventilation, but it is very obvious that air conditioning is now a necessity. It's not a luxury. Unfortunately, despite that, we are not an industry. We are having a topic today which is around cooling and the amount of money being put in, the growth rates, possibly the highest growing sector, possibly amongst all products, and yet an air conditioning is no longer, still not recognized as an industry.
Thank you, and I think you've set the stage really well for Mr. Panikkar. Representing MSMEs, right? Which have to be an integral part of the manufacturing ecosystem. What are your thoughts on the PLI, and what are the gaps that you think should be redressed as of yesterday?
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Before I answer that question, I want to just set the context right, so you know exactly where I'm coming from. So first of all, Java Saab, I think a lot of credit goes to you for bringing the government's focus on the industry. So thank you very much for that. And we completely endorse that, and I think getting the PLI is fantastic. Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Trade Association that I represent out here is an association of the MSMEs in the field of HVAC&R. What do these MSMEs do? There are only two kinds of MSMEs. One, who is a supplier, who is part of the supply chain to the large manufacturer, and the other half is the last mile connect to the customers from the manufacturer. This is about 90-95% of us. We've been competing before the PLI and everything, competing with the Chinese imports. Fantastic. Now I'll tell you what happens with the PLI. The PLI talks about 4 to 6% incentive post-sale, right? And Vishal set the tone. He said that these are ambitious targets. So if someone has to achieve it, we'll definitely pass some of it to the customers. That 4 to 5, 6%, let's be honest about it, it's going to get passed down. 25, 30, 40 companies have applied. Let's assume all of them are in the whole thing. These are large organizations, because this PLI is not designed for any of the small MSMEs or anything of that sort. Now, as an association, we reach out to 6,000 MSMEs, or 1,500 of them directly are members, representing about 10,000 crores of business and about 65,000 of the jobs or employees that we represent. I'm talking on behalf of these people. What happens when a large multinational company or a large company which has access to easy funds, has access to talent, and gets PLI, and gets into the component business, and scales up? Do you think MSMEs will be able to compete with them? Forget about the new ones. I'm talking about the ones who are already in the business. I have colleagues here who are sitting, who've competed with them and who've built 80%, 90% export business. Will they stay in business? The answer is no, they will not stay in business. So I'm being very blunt about it. the PLI, the way it is right now, is a death knell for the MSME as of now. Unless what Shika said when she said the PLI 2.0 is focused on the MSMEs. And it cannot take its long curve to let, okay, we will build it. It's the need of the there's a sense of urgency around it. And it just cannot be just incentives. It has to be an ecosystem that comes around it. That ecosystem, because these small MSMEs just don't need incentives, they need a lot of stuff. It's like the startup ecosystem, right? You need to build an entire ecosystem for that. MSMEs are just used because it's a fancy for all of them to use MSMEs, because it's a huge vote bank, they are the biggest employers. Seriously, has all those schemes really impacted the majority? The answer is no. So, to talk on the PLI, I can just go on and on this front. The PLI, the way it is great. It's brought focus onto our industry. There has to be a 2.2, which is focused on the MSME. Otherwise, all this opportunity that we are talking in the industry, I see this opportunity not from an entrepreneurial perspective, but I see it more from a national wealth. This is the national wealth that this country is offering us. And if that's what it is, and I think as a citizen of this country or as an entrepreneur of this country, I should get a fair playing ground to get those benefits of it. Today, it's not in my favor. That's my take on this.
Thank you. One of the often cited reasons, right, for this sort of vendor backward program that companies or large OEMs are not necessarily going towards is the lack of quality, the lack of standardization, the lack of certified, standards for that product to be able to brought into the supply chain by the larger companies in India. My question is to Mr. Java, that do you think with the PLI scheme directed, almost half of it is directed at the export market, what are some of the elements that will allow for that backward integration to be able to support the MSMEs within the country?
I first want to shake hands with you and want to tell you that I am not representing multinational company. Okay? I come from an SSI background, and I am from compressor market. I only want to just think little positive that where we were, where we are, and where we want to go. Do you think that situation is slightly better or getting better or no? That is my question to you.
So Java sir, I started off setting the contest saying that
no,
you set the tone and we owe it to you, no doubt about it.
Although we had a big wish list when we went to the government of India, but surely and certainly I want to answer Vishal's question on ease of doing business. 3 years back the ranking was 250 plus, and today it has actually come down to 62. And the aim, the Prime Minister Clarion at least says that, it should come down to 25, right? So on ease of doing business. Second, again, the man is not there, but I want to salute him. When he asked me that, okay, what are the big deterrents? And when we asked that, one is the sustainability, the innovation, why is R&D investments not coming? Because I have friends from the organized, and I need to be blamed, and I took the blame because I was representing those companies, 80% of the investment has come recently by the outside world, and the FDI inflow is all-time high, because they wanted to see alternate to China. The kind of investment which has come, whether it is on FDI or Forex, is all-time reserve is high. Thirdly, also for your information, that air conditioning industry has been taken as a sunrise industry before the PLI by the Prime Minister announcement himself. And fourthly, his need was, I am not representing government also, his motive always was that not to give it to the big companies, give it to those trade associations, because the ecosystem is only 25% in India, 75% is outside India. So please bring the SMEs to the fore. maybe communication. I'm not the ambassador, I'm not the person. The objective of the minister, and I was fighting on the other side with the minister and the other, that if you really want to grow, you should give it to the finished goods so that we can take these standards, international standard machines, to the export market. He said, no, my job is to actually support the SMEs. Please create an ecosystem, what China has done on mobiles, because maybe there were more than 200,000 companies, and today it is less than 50 companies, because what they are trying to do it in the mobile industry. And again, Foxconn, near to your territory, you go and see how much employment he has given. So his objective was very clear, that increase that 25% ecosystem to 75%, for which you please bring the SMEs first. So all the time our focus was not on finished goods, our focus was not on the exports, because he said exports, all these international brands are in any case available, right? The third thing he said that you should create a global supply chain system. So it is not totally negative. Yes, from zero, which we were not getting, perhaps we will get today. And with the cheap money coming again from, you will get a great opportunity, those who are forward looking, to have, because if any company has to create an ecosystem in the country, they cannot create it bringing people from there. So I think this should be seen little positively from that side. Yes, if you honestly ask me, the gaps are these only. The industry, the Refrigeration, Air Conditioning and Manufacturer Association, or the FICCI or the CI, they always wanted that finished goods also should be included. So I think the one of the two things, that one, it is a sunrise industry along with furniture, and also the objective was create the market, grow the market for MSMEs. These were the two questions. Yeah, now I will come back on to your question. Yes? Yeah. Please repeat the question.
I actually have another question for you now. So given the constraints that you've outlined for us, right, and acknowledging the constraints of the MSMEs, within the PLI scheme, what is it that can actually be done for building competitiveness or providing greater access to technology as well as capital, right, both within and beyond the PLI scheme for the SMEs within the HVAC sector in India?
See, I must also tell you that, apart from the scale, India has a great skill, also sustainability initiatives. It is very unfortunate that, the copper, the aluminium, many of the companies, Indian entrepreneurs, have gone and set up outside in Malaysia or in Taiwan or many other places. They don't sell here, but they sell it to many multinational outside. So I think one of the big success was that those companies have actually committed, and they just cannot produce it without the help of the SMEs. And one of the biggest component is compressor. Now compressor has got 158 parts. All those are going to be manufactured by my friend, your members. Because nobody can bring casting, because otherwise what was happening, casting from US comes here, you do casting here and goes back for the compressor, the bigger compressor I'm talking about. The smaller compressor now, there is an investment commitment which has come, is more than 8 million compressors out of those 40 million. We still have 32 million gaps, right? So I think all this should be seen, whether it is compressor, whether it is motor, whether it is PCB. Already the electronics, India is leading. The government at least intention is that, okay, let us make some beginning. And then look at, can you reach that 40 million? And then, we give you more incentive to take you to probably 100 million. So please support.
I'm with you on that.
Support. Mr. Kapoor, coming to you on this entire conversation, right, about competitiveness and sort of quality, with the export-oriented ambition of the PLI, do you see a backward integration in the way quality and technical standards will get incorporated into India?
So wrong guy to ask the question to. I'm going to leave it to Ritu and Mr. Java sir to answer that. But let's understand, again, going back to this point of view of the need of PLI and why it's come in. Yes, it's export oriented. We've all been talking about that. But there's a dichotomy over there. You talk of India market going to touch 40 million in 10 years. And we are at a production right now of 2-3 million at this point, made in India, and maybe reaching 5 million, 6 million. And then suddenly you say that, yes, all this investment is supposed to propel the export sector. How will the domestic sector be first served? Because the domestic sector itself is looking at huge numbers coming in the years ahead, and I hope they're true. So are these companies who are going to be investing or through PLI going to be looking at the export sector, or obviously they will first look at feeding the domestic markets? Because otherwise you will continue to import and continue to export the same product. Business-wise, it might make sense because exports are a little bit more profitable as compared to what to do domestically. But from an economy point of view, from a government point of view, I don't think it adds up. So the focus will need to remain more, I would say, on domestic to meet the demands, because importing is going to be difficult. For example, imports are not allowed with refrigerants today. Okay, so that itself is a good stumbling block, if I could call that. It was a deterrent that stop importing. There are incentives to make in India, and then there are deterrents to stop making in India, to stop importing. Now, that is a very big deterrent to charge refrigerants, bring in a machine, charge it. You have to put up facilities, etc. for that. On your question on technology, I think Java Sahib talked about something which is very correct, is how much of backward integration can a company do themselves? They will have to outsource. You look at the automobile sector, when the automobile sector peaked a couple of decades ago, that opened, but through outsourced companies. It says when a company puts up a factory in one city, an automobile company, that whole city or around that city becomes a big hub. It is not just that company. It's like when a Maruti came, or what maybe Nano went to Gujarat instead of Bengal. It all around that, the whole economy grows. It's not just that the company grows. It's everyone around that. Multiple companies will put up setups. There are support things. You'll have to put up hotels and hospitals and malls. Entire economy changes. All these large companies, when they tie up with MSMEs or they approve MSMEs, they ensure that their technology, their practices, their good practices are also transferred to those OEM suppliers. It is not staying limited, because a bad part there is going to impact your finished goods. So it's but obvious that any technology that they imbibe or they put in standards as part of their manufacturing protocols, whether they manufacture it in-house or they have outsourced tie-ups, are going to be taken across board. And that will be also implemented in those OEM companies, taking the overall standard of manufacturing of the country ahead. And finally, just to close my part, why do we always say good quality linked to exports? This is something which I have never understood. Why should we always say, since you're going to start exporting, we should look at better quality? Why? Better quality is quality. It's whether you're selling it to an Indian customer or you're selling it to a European customer. It makes no difference. So the quality standards in India today are already very high. Yes, you can make it far better, but over the last few years, it's gone the distance and primarily targeting a domestic buyers, and I'm just sure that that's going to continue the path ahead.
Thank you. Turning to you, Ritu, in Panasonic's experience, right? What Mr. Kapoor has just said, has that rung true? Because of course we recognize the multiplier effect of manufacturing, which is why we're all here talking about it. But from a company point of view, what really have been the big challenges, right? Quality related to export or quality related to pricing. These are challenges we hear about at every discussion, right? But what are the real world implications of that, and how do you move past them?
Okay, in fact, me also, before I can answer this question, I would just like to comment on the ongoing discussion. So there are no two ways about it. And as we mentioned in our opening remark, a global supply chain map. That's what it is. That's the hub being there. Having said that, when we talk about export being there, I think export is being spoken more in terms of that when we are gunning to scale up with capacity, which is humongous, then how do we expand the market? Where is the market? So then we start viewing the market not just as the domestic, but also the global, and that's where the export piece fills in. So during our journey, we did a study, and then we came up with the Thailand example. And so it's the entire holistic story, which again, during this journey, as I said, it's just one part of the journey. PLI is just setting the ball rolling. Building an ecosystem is a second part of the journey, which is a humongous task, and wherein this piece cannot be ignored. We cannot. I mean, then we'll be going against the law of economy and nature. So forget about our vision, we will not be able to sustain only. That comes a part and parcel, but we have to understand this is the second journey we have initiated and we have stepped into. And if we are able to match the affordability angle, so for example, I think this has been an ask where we say, why not we increase the adoption of 5-star rating energy efficient air conditioners, and maybe one move could be that maybe to have the affordability angle, the GST only on that part could be reduced. So we'll have to come up with certain innovative and off-the-cuff decisions to just see that how other policy things which the government has been doing but innovatively keeps doing, to have this journey we have a fruitful outcome for the next 5 years, 7 years, like the Thailand has done. And there, if we have to show where is the market, so right now, again, as per the study, 30% of the global demand is met through imports. If one can get, and this will be increasing, it will grow 5 times the fold in 2030. So if we are able to capture 25% of that, that's the roadmap being shown on what is the opportunity that lies, so do not stop. Apart from the penetration that can be done within India itself. So with that vision, I'll connect this to the Panasonic question. That's the kind of vision we see. That's the kind of approach we take with our head office globally, that here's an opportunity which India can offer you. So again, if we can expand and everybody, and obviously the standards each organization has been saying has to be globally, which have to be sustainable, adopted, if we have to be at that mark.
So if I can move back to you, Mr. Panikkar, I think the ecosystem issue, I don't think there's anybody in this room or any room actually which has any industry representative that would disagree, right? That you need ecosystem improvements. But if I can push a bit harder on that startup point that you made, right, about SMEs and MSMEs, the way that startups operate are very different from the way MSMEs operate, right? So what also needs to change from the industry, right? That quality, affordability, and yet the grit, right? To become a part of a global value chain, come back intact.
All right. So I'm not on the opposition side here, okay? I just want to make this very clear. Okay? So I endorse what the government has done. It's incredible. It's incredible what they have done, and stalwarts also who have actually brought the focus of the industry. We support it completely. There's no doubt about it. I'm only talking hard from a future equitable stake. From a democratic standpoint, I'm concerned that what happens in the next 10 years, do we get a fair share? If we don't talk about it today, there's no point regretting about it later. Now, to answer Shika's question, let me give you a simple example. Most large companies or manufacturers do a fantastic job in vendor development. And I'll actually try to bring that whole point of that ecosystem, what we talk about. What happens when an Indian manufacturer goes to sell the product to the manufacturer? First thing you'd say, specifications sahi nahi hai. It's not good. You need to improve. Coming to quality perspective, right? So he builds the whole quality, goes back. Please remember, these guys are not funded. These guys have mortgaged their houses and run the business. So whatever they are, and they work, the working capital in this country for MSMEs come when I mortgage my house. Okay, I don't get easy money at the rate of about starting if it's about 11%, coming down to about 8% as I grow the business. That's the reality. So after I have built these specifications, then I go to the commercial, and he says that ab mujhe bechna hai, I want to sell it to you. So he says, dude, your price, I can get it cheaper than from China. It's so easy. It's a lose-lose battle. I want to be in this business. And this is a story that's across the MSMEs across this country. What we need is an ecosystem. An ecosystem that, when you say for MSMEs, it is just not an incentive. You get another 3%, another 4%. You need to build an ecosystem around it. Now, what is the ecosystem? Before I touch on that ecosystem, let's see what we have successfully done in India, right? The startup ecosystem. Kids who knew nothing, you've supported, you build an ecosystem, you built incubation, you got equity, private equity to play, you got the VCs to play. What do you have today? 100 unicorns. How many jobs did you create? What a fabulous thing the government has done. No doubt about it. Can't we learn from them? Can't we learn from what we had done? Can't we learn from Mittelstand what Germany has done? Why can't we learn from these things? Why can't MSMEs, we cannot have a program called as Scale Up India? Build an ecosystem around it. Why can't they have incubation? I understand. MSME approach is not like that of a startup. If this is the focus industry, can we run a Scale Up India program for this for the HVAC industry? Can this become a prototype for all the other MSMEs of all the other industry? They need access to ideas. They need access to markets. They need ideas to good quality product. Good quality, but define good quality. I don't know about it. I need to know what I can get into manufacturing. I need to access to a place to put it. I need access to working capital. That's the entire incubation that you need. You need to have that hand holding. Only then truly representative this industry will become, not just for the local market. Let's be global players. But we need hand holding around this. The ecosystem needs to address that. The PLI 2 should be to motivate to build that ecosystem, not incentivize. That's where the jobs are going to get created. And that's my point, and it's more from a future perspective. Having got this right, I think we need to just get it better. Right? Thanks.
So onwards to better, and this is for the entire panel. For the PLI to meet its successes, right? What are some of the elements? We mentioned, Ritu mentioned that sustainability is not a core element or a requirement of it yet. Yet we see practices moving in that space. But we also know that having MEPs was a game changer, right, in getting the manufacturing to reach a certain level of efficiency within the country and getting those products into the market. So to the panel, what is that PLI 2.0? What should the current PLI, what should the duration of the current PLI actually look like? And what are some of the elements that the PLI 2.0 must include? Should I start with you, Mr. Panikkar?
Sure, gladly. So I think PLI 2 needs to be planned quickly. So if it's going to come at its own pace, I think you'll have a bigger problem to handle. So it needs to be planned quickly. Second, it should just not be only around incentivization. It should be a complete incubation model. If you have to build that kind of components, one thing is very clear. The existing people who are in the industry is just not enough. You need to bring in people from other industries or people who are in the ecosystem but not into those manufacturing. Say, for example, can we identify those traders or system integrators who have the potential because they have the domain expertise to get into one of those fields? Can we handhold them? Can we mentor them? And can we fix those problems they have, of getting those licenses? You're talking to a bunch of people who we spoke about ease of doing business. We've done very well, but half of them think that, dude, manufacturing is not happening in this country. It's a mindset game that we need to change. A mere incentive in PLI for MSMEs will not do the job. It has to be a larger ecosystem in terms of building an incubation and thinking of, can I identify the next 200 companies in the first phase to come on board into the manufacturing? They could be existing manufacturers, or they could be people who are not in the manufacturing but in the domain wanting to get into it. That should be the first step to get into it. That's what I would say it should be.
I think you have said right that yes, ecosystem, but this is just a first step which has been taken by the government, and we should appreciate that. Surely and certainly, again, going back on to what she said, maybe this time the collaboration took place with some of the associations. It was initiated by FICCI, SOCHM came, CII came, and Rama also came. And SIAMA also came, and a lot of people who were associated with SIAMA they are also party to this. Apart from 6 or 7 main manufacturers, I think a lot of SMEs have also participated in this. But yes, individually you can only break barrier and collectively you can create a new horizon. So I think the next PLI 2, people like you should get involved into it so that you can understand from the other side that what actually has been done and what could not be done. There was a whole lot of wish list in this. And idea was this only, that when we are actually able to take these standards, like, when you're talking about quality and when you're talking about the cost, I don't think that, a lot of initiatives have been taken by BEE. In the morning we were talking about. If you take the standards of energy labeling or the sustainability standards, last 8 years, 4 times BEE has changed its standard. And today, we are competing with the globe, on global cooling price. And it is not that world is looking at a quality product. India is maybe looking at the quality products which are higher than the world, but value for money. It's like you don't want cheap, but you want value for money. We have seen this in the cars of Suzuki. Just take one example. Or even take Daikin. I mean, we have grown 16 times in the last 10 years. So it is not that, you can supply one VRV. It has to be a zero defect, right? If you are producing a centrifugal chiller, or a magnetic chiller, it's not that the customers are all the same. The world class, top class hotels or airports or malls, no one can afford not to have. So I think it's just a question that, and also SMEs or MSMEs and all, when you come, the whole idea of the government is this only what you are wanting to actually hear. There the idea was that, okay, how many suppliers you can get from outside who can actually give opportunity to the existing suppliers or existing traders or system integrators, in fact, that we could build this ecosystem. So I think the target which has been signed by so-called industry leaders or so-called association is that how do we take it to 75%? So that we don't land up in a current situation what we have been. Today even the US is actually in the same problem. UK is also in the same problem because the only growth engine globally is China. Now if you want to really look at it, that which is the second option? When the investments were decided by Japan, just to give you one example, they looked at 5 countries. 5 mighty countries, they wanted to all get out of China. Now, which were the 5 countries? First was Vietnam, but again the issue is more than 40% you cannot invest. Then they went to Bangladesh. Bangladesh also got finished very early. Malaysia, again bilateral issues and all. So the only country which they could see is India, because they could see these kind of fighting spirit which you are trying to show. So please come forward, work with them and work for them. The government objective is very clear, that at least the Prime Minister Clarion is very, very clear that how do we create an ecosystem which can support my SMEs, and when you actually partner with these kind of suppliers, you also have an access to the easy money, right? The whole issue is that, okay, maybe some of the constraints have been told and some are still not been communicated. So if this PLI 2 can address those, and coming back on to Vishal's question that, first of course we are looking at affordability, sustainability. Now whether we can get that from Indian market or no. But obviously you can't go to the markets like Europe or US, which are already mature markets, or Japan, you cannot go in. But India, fortunately, the brain and brawn, if country like Japan comes together with India, what you can do is you can go into the emerging markets like Africa. 18% of the world market which has not been capitalized by Indians, and 17% of the world market is in India. So you have an access to 35% of markets which are low cost market, which are probably non-inverter market, or which are actually, you can use India's scale and go with these benefits. These benefits are again not sufficient. If you are trying to address the disability factor of 12 to 15% versus China, maybe 6% you got it here. 6% they have decided that, okay, you get with the economies of scale. And the directive again is signed that you are not going to pass it on to to the customer. That is also an understanding. So therefore that, 3 billion which has come from China, at least 4 becomes 7. And 7 becomes 24 for domestic. And 16 is, which is coming from these emerging markets, where again, you as a company or you as a country has excess that you can produce at the lowest cost. If you produce in India today, what is being produced in Europe is 30% cheaper here. So the government also wants to, or the world wants to encash on your skill capabilities. Obviously, I mean, we have not made investments on research and development. How many companies in the country has made, till very recently, on research and development or on skilling or on creating this ecosystem? So rather than just saying that, okay, we don't want to create an ecosystem unless you give me money, or, let's look at how we can communicate our message to those people. Now today, these three agencies, believe you me, in last 42 years, I have never seen this kind of an ecosystem. I think the golden era for country is going to start, because you have FDI, you have Forex, you have government who is willing to listen to you, and they are competing with each other. DPIT, Invest India, and Niti Aayog are competing. And on top of it now, my friends, Scale Committee. Now, it's not that we did not have fight. We were actually telling Scale Committee chairman there, I said, what are you talking about? If you cannot bring Matube here, or if you cannot bring Hindalco here, who are supplying to me outside India, I mean, what is the ecosystem we are talking about? So please force them that they are Indian people, and they have to make this investment. So some of these communication, collaboration, at the same time, which I said in the beginning, Jugalbandi. And I am not hesitating to tell you again, if we can't do it now, we have to be blaming ourselves what we have been blaming earlier. Because opportunity is lying in your neighborhood. Maybe we have to blame ourselves that we could not encash it for so many years. Now, some opportunity is there. Let's try and see if we can capitalize on that.
Absolutely, if I may take the opportunity. So thank you. And I will be on the same page. In fact, it becomes the duty because the thought process which you are putting forward, and I'm glad that this came out, only makes us realize that yes, we should be talking more, because this was exactly the thought process with which we came. And when this example was taken, I would not want to again take the name of that particular manufacturer, but the industry went up to the level of ensuring and assuring the raw material manufacturer that if you enhance and scale your supplies, we are there to take it. And in order to do that, we are already hand-holding them as an industry to match up the quality that we are expecting. This job is already happening on ground. So had I been a male, I would have told you, let's catch up for a beer. And yeah, so not to give any wrong messages, although we can still do that, but the idea is to enhance communication so the collaboration can go beyond. So that's where the intention is. And just to assure you, that's already happening. Some suppliers, we are already, in fact, it's a commitment we've given that in our journey from 25% to 75%, we are doing already. But then that's, yeah, I would just like to mention that. Thanks.
Mr. Kapoor.
Very difficult job of being the last panelist, trying to close. Everything's been talked about.
Oh, there's more coming.
So I just thought I'll just say ditto and move on from there. But it's just one thing which I think Mr. Java also hit upon and Ritu also talked upon was on this, the challenge we're facing recently is on the raw material pricing. And it's hit everyone. It's hit the manufacturing sector. It's obviously hit the construction sector. And it's really tough right now. And I don't know how much we're engaging with the government on that. Because if this continues, this word called affordable cooling is going to disappear. There's nothing called affordable today about cooling, frankly, if you ask me. It's become the most expensive cooling. Which whatever you might do with your quality, whatever you might do with PLIs, etc., if that's the cost of input, what will you be doing with output? So I think that's one thing which some point we need, I'm sure the talks are going on and conversations are on with the relevant department, but I think we need to stress a little bit more on that. And I'll go back to my first point, just to sum up, in my opinion, for this part of the session, would be on cost of capital. You've got to hit cost and capital for businesses to invest in India. Specifically for the MSME sector, it's a lot of there on paper, outside the PLI and all that, but MSME scheme, there's a lot on paper, but very little in translation and actual. So we need to look at those aspects to encourage people to put up businesses, whether in manufacturing or whatever else.
Thank you, actually, for bringing that up. Arunabha sent me a message just as he was leaving, asking me to ask you all exactly this question, that how does finance and the cost of finance become central to the ecosystem conversation when we're speaking to government? I think I'm going to look to Mr. Java to answer that.
No, there are already some initiatives which are being taken, and as I said that, one of the question, very interesting though, during this PLI conversation when we were having with the scale committee chief, the point came even Indian versus global, that schemes should be different. Remember, then we actually, so apart from, and one of the other challenge was that, okay, you have a capital accessibility to capital at a very cheap rates. And then this point came up that, okay, how many of you are actually ready? So if some of you are ready, there are already some finance companies from Japan all the time. Yeah, again, answer to your question of, I think this was the fundamental of PLI. So I'll be failing if I don't. We were anticipating this, that perhaps we did not anticipate unicorn war. But when China thing happened in the first year, everyone started talking about how do we move out of China. And India was the best place because of the population and because of the skill and capability and at the same time the vision of. Thank you.
So,
leading from the front. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, yes, Mr. Panikkar.
Because you spoke about the MSME capital,
Yeah.
I just want to share
Yeah.
something on that front. This got nothing to do with the PLI or anything. I think there's great intent from the government also to distribute and make sure the benefits should go from cost of capital to MSMEs. But I'll tell you where the problem is. It's not from the government, it's in the distribution mechanism. The government doesn't know which MSME to give it to. So what do? They give it to SIDBI. MSME does not have access to SIDBI. I'm just giving you one example. There are multiple forums. MSME doesn't have an access to, it's not a retail bank, I don't have access to it. So what SIDBI does is, it goes back to the national retail banking chain and say that, hey, you guys identify the MSME and give the money to him. Now when it reaches there, okay, that bank now sees a threat. I'm in the lending business. Why should I promote this government scheme which gives me only 2% when I can earn 6%? So if you're an MSME and you reach a bank and if you don't know the schemes, you will never get it. Most of the MSMEs are not even aware what their rights are, what the government is doing for them. That is also contributing into the cost of capital. So even if though the intent is there, the delivery mechanism is not in place. And I think the entire GST portal which has been created has created so much of data. I think you need to cut through this bureaucracy. Go straight down. Direct to consumer has been such a huge success in our country, Why aren't you going direct to the MSME? Identify who are the guys. The numbers are in place. And I think that needs to come in play to make a big impact.
I think we need to write a report together, Mr. Panikkar. Lots of really interesting ideas coming from you. But I want to say thank you to this awesome panel. I'm sorry I didn't have time to open up for questions to the audience, but we're going to move into lunch now, so please feel free to come and eat their brains as well. Thank you very much, and a big round of applause for my panel, please.